Hello, welcome to Philosophy 103, Ideas That Change the World. This is Dr. Brewer. I'm really excited about today's lecture. I think this topic that we're going to be discussing today is a really fascinating one. It's the sort of topic that I think we're going to wind up asking more questions than providing answers to. But I think that's part of what makes it fun. I don't know that there's any real good answers to the questions we're going to be raising today, or at least I don't have any good answers for you. There are some other philosophers who have raised really interesting possible answers or solutions to this question, and we'll be looking at those today. If you recall, the format of this class is to introduce an interesting idea, an idea that's changed the world, and then talk about that a little bit, and then work backwards and look at some of the philosophers who either came up with that idea or some of the more influential ideas that they came up with that are related to that idea. So as you can see on the screen, the idea today is the idea of time. And the first question I want to ask is, what is time? And really, this is the primary question, not just the first. It's the primary question we're going to be asking today. What is time? Again, if we were in person, if we were having an in-person class session right now, I would give you time to break into groups and to discuss this idea and come up with some of your thoughts about what you think time is. And I love hearing from my students. I love kind of hearing your ideas and your thoughts whenever I raise questions like this. I think that's part of what philosophy is all about, is getting my students to think about these interesting ideas and to try to come up with solutions and thoughts of their own. So I wish we were together and I wish I could hear your thoughts on it. But this is going to be the guiding question for today's lecture. And really, in some ways, it's an odd question, right? How many of us ever really stop and think about what is time? We use it all the time, pun intended, but we rarely ever stop to think about what it is, right? Is it a thing, or is it really just a measurement, right? Is it a way of measuring the days and hours and minutes that really just correlates to the rotation of the earth around the sun, right? Or is it, as I said initially, is time something? Is it something that's a part of the universe, independent of our planet revolving around the sun, right? Or independent of our watches and our clocks and our calendars? So this is the kind of question we're going to be raising today. What is time? We use it all the time. We all have phones with clocks on them. Most of us have watches. We all have calendars. We all have different ways of marking off days of the week, hours of the day, minutes of the hour. We all talk about being on time for class, or when a class session is going to be posted, when a due date is. So we use time all the time, right? But very rarely do we actually stop and ask the question, what is it? And that's where philosophers come in, right? Philosophers are this interesting group of people who stop and ask questions about interesting things like, okay, we talk about time and we use time, but what do we mean by it? What is that thing that we call time? So we're just going to roll around in this question a little bit here today. I'm going to go through a bunch of slides. And really the point of the first part of this lecture is just to raise this question, right? To poke at it a little bit and to explore different aspects of this notion of time, how we use it, how different cultures use it. And then as we get further into the lecture, I'll talk about some interesting philosophers who came up with some different interesting ideas about time. So the first thing I want us to think about are the various time-telling devices that we use in our lives. We have clocks, we have calendars. As you'll see in a moment, going back centuries, we've used sundials, we've used lunar calendars, right? We have all these different forms of time-telling devices. But there's also sort of a biological and a psychological component to it as well. We tend to have these sort of biological rhythms. There's a lot of women who talk about their biological clock. If you're young and you're dating, a lot of younger ladies, at least in American culture, will talk about how their biological clock is ticking, right? And what they mean is that, especially if you know movies that deal with time travel with cyclical views, or if you have questions about this, I'd be happy to hear from you. Otherwise, I hope you have a good week. And until then, we'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.